Therapy roulette, consent event, trauma disguised as comedy. Therapy roulette, consent event. If you don't have problems, then you're likely repressing shit and you should find a therapist who's not me.
Welcome back to Therapy Roulette, Consent Event. I'm Michele, Baci, your host. Today I have a guest, Jedidah, who is a product and digital marketer. She's a content strategist for nonprofits that tackle the needs for women and girls. She's the founder of gapmuse.com, a lifestyle blog, and the founder of the podcast Her Canvas, which helps women find inspiration to live their best lives. Jedidah, thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course.
So thank you for having me for sure.
After you gave me the guest spot on Her Canvas, I was like, oh, I got to have her on Therapy Roulette.
Yes, and it was great to have you, by the way. And
thank you.
Our session, we talked about finances and how to help women gain the confidence to manage their finances, and it's doing really well. We've had quite a few downloads, so I'm pretty happy about it. So thank you for that.
Nice. I'm always trying to encourage people to confront their money, learn how to invest. Don't just pretend it doesn't exist. Figure out what you're doing.
Yes, it's so important. It really is.
Yeah. Figure out how to make that money work for you.
Yeah, make some good money moves.
So, how was your Valentine's Day? Did you do anything out of the ordinary?
No, not really. I did what I always do, which is make myself and my family feel good. I'm one of those people that believe that you don't need anybody to make you feel loved.
For sure.
It's nice to have someone make you feel that way, but it can't be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be miserable because I don't have a Valentine's.
It's not like a solution to
find
a partner. No.
And I want my girls to know that. So we had a lot of sweets.
I think I saw something on your Twitter, like dessert shots. Yeah.
Yes, I got this. It was kind of like one of those impulse purchases.
Yeah.
So I was at the grocery store and I was picking up that regular cake, our favorite cake. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it says dessert shots. And I was like, in my mind, I thought alcohol. So I was like, bing. And then I was like, I have to get these. And then I asked the person at the bakery, place, do these have alcohol? And they're like, no. But I still got them because the fact that they didn't have alcohol made it so that I could share them with my girls and with my family. So it was wonderful. They were delicious. All they were missing really was a shot.
Yeah. Which you could add that on the side for you.
You could. Yeah.
That's so funny.
What about you?
Mine was pretty ordinary. I went for a bike ride with my boyfriend and his two friends. So we got outside, socialized a little bit, and we're definitely out of shape. So we need to be bike riding. So I think it was good to kick that into gear and be like, this should be easier,
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's I like that. I like that you got to go outdoors and bike.
Yeah. I've been trying to be more active because I feel like this lockdown is, it's depriving me of exercise and endorphins. So I'm like, I need to find that somehow.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm actually planning to go on a walk this afternoon because the weather's great out here. So why not?
Nice. Yeah. The walks are key to making my lockdown experience better.
Yeah, that's right. For sure.
So I ask all my guests about therapy. And I think you mentioned you haven't done therapy before. So why haven't you done it? And what do you do in your daily life to make it so you don't need therapy?
I haven't done therapy because I feel like I haven't gotten to the point where I need it, where I feel like I need it.
You don't have a urge in your mind.
Exactly. But actually, let me correct that because I feel like I haven't gotten to the point where I need to go talk to someone because I feel like there are different types of therapy, right? Like there's a therapy where you actually go talk to someone and tell them, what the issues are and where you think you need help. And I dance, although with quarantine, there hasn't been a lot of in-person dancing. So I do West African and
Ooh,
dance, and I do Cuban salsa. And
wow.
both of those are really like in-person things to do, right? Because
Yeah.
like the West African dances, we have live drummers, and then we have teacher, and then you have all of these dancers, really a diverse set of dancers, and you really feed off of other people's energy. So for like an hour and a half, you're sweating, you're jumping up and down, and you're really, by the time I leave, I feel like I have cleared my mind, I have cleared myself of all the toxins that I've been collecting through
Right.
the week. And I usually do it like on Fridays. So, and then the salsa, the Cuban salsa is different. I do rueda, which is like you dance in a circle
Hmm.
and you have partners. And so that's very, close proximity. So we can't do any of that. So for a whole year, like when quarantine happened, COVID happened, and when quarantine, I was like, oh my gosh, my therapy's gone. And
Yes.
so I started to do it like via Zoom, like some of my teachers offer the classes. And then I also do like YouTube videos,
Hmm.
but it's not the same,
Yeah, I've gotten
because
so into the YouTube fitness circuit because I used to
hmm
go to like yoga classes and really seek out in-person fitness classes, and
hmm
I haven't done that at all in quarantine. So
yeah. And so that's been hard. And I have to confess that with my dancing, it's gotten harder and harder to do it with video.
well,
So
that's
I kind of,
really I never thought about it like with the energy, but it really is like
hmm
a room type of thing. Like you want to be in the
yes.
room with the music and the other people.
hmm and I've developed a community too.
Hmm.
I've been dancing for a long time, so I've made a lot of friends, and then a lot of times new people come in, and there's something to be said for meeting new people, and I like to make them feel comfortable and dance along them so that they can feel like, hey, you'll get there sometime, at some time.
Yeah,
We all started there, so that's been hard, but
because dancing is hard. So I assume a new person walks into it kind of self conscious.
oh my gosh, so self-conscious. And when you work, when you walk into anything, even a yoga class, because I do yoga, and
Hmm.
the first time you do it, you're like, oh my gosh, what are these people doing? And when am I ever going to
Yes.
be able to do that?
And they're all
And
speaking in code with the warrior poses and like this language you don't know.
I know, I'm like, what are they taught? Warrior pose, what are we supposed to be doing now? And then your balance is off. But I always go back to something. When I first started dancing, I took a jazz class.
Oh, I love
And
jazz class. I love jazz dancing, although I am totally an amateur.
and I remember the teacher. She was fabulous. I mean, she would make us stretch for half an hour, which for me was like, oh my god, why are we stretching for
Yeah.
days? I was really flexible then. This is a long time ago. But she said something. She said, anybody who walks into my class, I want you to know that all of these people who you see doing their fancy moves and looking like divas, that they started just like you. Nobody is born knowing how to do jazz.
Yeah.
and
That's so true.
and she said, you're going to feel awkward, you're going to be, but feel awkward because you're trying. Don't feel awkward because the people around you seem to be doing so well.
Hmm.
And for me, that was amazing. Every time I go into a situation, because I try to do new classes where I don't know what I'm doing, just so that I can get that uncomfortable feeling. And I think it's really good for the brain.
It is.
And I always remember that thing that she said, and it's really helpful.
That's a great teacher
Mm-hmm.
to really set the tone like, hey, you're all terrible. We're all on page one and
Mm-hmm.
we'll be awkward together, and if you stick with it, you could be a great dancer.
Yeah, and that's what I tell, like when I see new people. Like, I'll give you a story. This one guy, he started doing our salsa class, and oh my gosh, he was so nervous. He used to shake. Like, when you're dancing, he would be like, I could feel like the nerves. And and I always used to say to him, I always used to say to him, don't worry about it. Keep coming. Just
Mhm.
keep coming. You'll notice that every time you come, you get better. Every time you come, you start understanding Spanish. Because my teacher is a Cuban and they call out the dances in Cuban, and I'm like, I don't speak Spanish. But after a while, you just pick it up. You should see him today. He's
Not
actually
shaking.
a, he's actually a better salsa dancer than I am. He's that
What?
good. Yes. He got so good. He kept coming. He stopped shaking. He added a little bit of funk to his movement. It's just amazing.
That's impressive. And
So,
it shows you, like, if you're a good student and you just
hmm
persist, you keep showing
hmm
up, you don't know what could happen.
you don't know. You don't know. And so yeah. So dancing, yoga, hiking. I do a lot of hiking.
I love
Not
hiking.
okay. I'm lying. Not a lot. When I can.
You've hiked before, you will hike
Well,
again.
yeah. I try to do. My goal is once a month because I'm really
Oh,
busy.
I would say that's a lot.
Um, and or at least 2 to 3 times a quarter. So
Mhm.
that's my goal. But I don't beat myself up if I don't do it. As long as I'm walking, going out for a walk, then I'm like, it's all good.
Do you go hiking by yourself or do you go with a group?
I do all of it. I sometimes I go by myself because I just want to be by myself.
Yeah.
I enjoy my company, my own company, and sometimes I just want that solace and to be in my space and in myself.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I go with family, like I'll go with my girls. They love to hike.
And
Um,
how old are your daughters?
oh my gosh, I can't believe this. They're going so fast. I have a 17-year-old. I have a
Wow.
woman, a young woman in the house, and I have an 11-year-old.
That must keep
So
you very, very busy.
super busy. But I have to say, I've always, when as a parent, I've always thought I'm raising adults, right? I want them to be self-sufficient. So they're very good at helping out. I mean, they're kids, so a lot of times, sometimes I have to nudge a little bit, like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe we should do this. But I'd say overall, I'm busy because there's so much you have to do when you have kids, just to make sure that their lives are comfortable.
Mhm.
But I as a woman, one of the things that is so important to me and that I advocate for other women and girls is that you should never lose yourself, because we
Mhm.
tend to do that, right? Like once you become a mom,
Yes.
when you have a boyfriend, when you get married, it's like, oh, bye, Jedidah. Hello,
Yeah.
everybody else.
Or
you know?
yeah, sometimes, like, depending on who you're hanging out with, like
hmm
what path you're on, you might kind of get caught up in it.
Yeah. And then, for women
Bye,
especially,
Jedidah. Come back, Jedidah. We
right?
miss you.
Yeah. So it's true.
I've
So you,
definitely heard that from people in bad relationships. Like, once they get
mhm.
out of the bad relationship, it's like, oh, we have our friend back.
Right. And a lot of times it's like you ask yourself, who am I? And what did I used to love to do? Because before
Yes.
you met someone, before you were a mom, before you were all of those roles that women play, you were you, and you
Hmm.
had things that you like to do. So, but and a lot of times you get the pushback. Sometimes people say, "But where's the time?" And I always say, you can find 30 minutes to think about you and what you like to do. And
For
you have
sure.
to, you need to train the people around you, to even your own children, to give you that space. You need to be able to say, hey, for an hour today, I'm going to be talking to Michele. I'm going on this podcast. And I'm so excited. So don't come in and, I'm going to be like doing this because this is what I love to do. And my girls know that I love to advocate for women and girls, and that's my passion, and so they afford me that space.
That's
And
so
then
important.
once I'm done, I give them my full attention. I'm like, you have me, because I know one day they're going to leave, and then what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah,
So,
especially like we're recording on a Saturday, so I feel like the
mm-hmm,
weekends living with your daughters is probably like, all about them kind of on the weekend.
mm-hmm. And you have to, and if you train them to think that it's all about them all the time,
It's
then
not good.
that's that's what they do. And then when they go out on their own, that's what they're going to think, that once you become a mom, you have to give up everything about you, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So I try, and children do what you do, not what you tell them to do.
Right. You're setting
So
an example.
exactly, they don't. So your kids are not going to exercise because you told them to exercise, or go on a hike because you told them to go on a hike. If you don't go on a hike, they're not going to go. If you don't exercise, you're not going to exercise.
Right.
So
They'll just be a hypocrite like you.
yeah, exactly.
You have to lead by
Exactly.
example.
You have to. I mean, and so I, so I carve out time for myself to do the things that I love to do, not just to set a good example for my daughters, but because I am still Jedidah.
Mm-hmm.
And Jedidah had, things that she loved to do before she became all these other things.
Before
And
you had
it's,
to, open more space in your life to be a mom.
mm-hmm. And as women, sometimes there's some guilt that comes with that, because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be a wife. Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be a girlfriend. Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to, especially when kids are involved.
Yes.
I'm supposed, why this, I could be spending this time, doing something with my kids. And so, and society sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times actually makes you feel that way. Like, shouldn't you be, you hear women ask, like, where are your kids right now? It's like, somewhere, like, with someone. You never hear like men ask that, like, how are you juggling having children and work, or having a podcast? People ask me, how are you doing a podcast, which is like, where's the time? And I'm like, I don't have the time, I just don't sleep much.
Yeah.
And and I have a lot of patience. It took me 3 years to do that, to be able to do the podcast.
Oh
Three
yeah.
whole
And that
years.
patience, you got to keep tapping into that patience every week.
Yeah, every week, 30 minutes a day. If you calculate 30 minutes a day, that translates into almost 5 hours a week. And then if you can do an hour or two on the weekends, it's on the aggregate. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you
It's starting to
achieved your
build,
dream.
compound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I owe a lot to one of my early therapists, because she really got me off the ground with the podcast. Like, why don't you
Mm-hmm.
just do a little bit every day? And then, if you're working on it every day, it will get done at a certain
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing someone else say that, I was like, that makes sense.
Right.
Whereas
And
it seemed so impossible before.
it does. And it can also be discouraging sometimes. Like, we both belong to the Fuzzy Sprout
Mhm. The
community, and
platform.
the
Yeah.
platform, and you hear people like, oh my gosh, they launch like an episode a week, 2 episodes a week. And you can get caught up in it and be like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. But
If you
you
start
have,
comparing yourself, which leads you down a bad rabbit hole.
exactly. And I'm like, you have to be, you have to do it at your own pace. So I would love to do an episode a week, but that's unrealistic. I would be putting out junk, really.
Yeah. It's
So
hard. I've
I'm
been doing
like,
weekly podcasts, and I'm like constantly on the verge of burnout if I'm not already burnt out. I'm like,
mm-hmm,
how do you keep this going? So I'm trying to reinvent ways where I can like make it easier on myself,
mm-hmm.
or switch something up.
Right. Like, what can you automate, or what can you, I mean, and so I was saying to a friend of mine, I said, it's compromise. Like, I would love to do more. It would give me more downloads, it would give me more exposure. But I just, realistically, being able to do one a month is like the best thing ever.
Because you don't want to sacrifice on that quality.
I don't want to sacrifice on that quality. And I also don't want to give up on my dream. So I'm like,
What's your dream?
it's not always going to be this way. I'm not always not going to have the time to do what I want to do. But I can't say I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to wait until I have the time, because I don't know what's going to happen at that time. So I might as well do it now.
Yeah, do it today.
Do it today, whatever I can, because I'm building on something. And when the time comes when my girls are, a little more independent and they don't need me as much, I will already have a foundation. I will already have my podcast. It's not like I'm going to be starting from scratch.
Yeah.
I might be able to do, geez, an episode a day. Who knows?
You're laying the groundwork, and you're also
Yeah.
learning the skills, because a lot of this is like
Mhm.
you have to learn how to podcast,
Yeah.
and that takes time.
Yeah. I have a friend, she has like a producer and she has all of these resources. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you and I were like the casting director, the producer, the director, the everything, the editor.
She has a team.
She has a team. I'm like, we're doing this all by ourselves. But it's
Yeah.
also, again, I'm setting an example. When my daughters see me like trying to figure out the tech that goes with it, I mean, I do a lot of like bootstrapping.
For sure, yeah. I have a small team of like a friend who helps me produce and get guests, and I have my sister helping with social media. But I feel like I'm doing like a lot of production work, and so it does get overwhelming.
It gets overwhelming, and
but your daughters are watching you.
That they're
on
watching
your dream.
me, yeah, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Like when we recorded the second. I have a trailer, and then we recorded the second or the third episode, which was how to stay motivated and positive during COVID. And I was like, okay, I only have one mic. How are we going? How am I going to have? And I had my daughters on. They're actually on that episode.
Yes, I listened to that one. It was cool to hear their voices.
Yes, and how am I going to have them on
with one microphone?
With one microphone, and oh my gosh, I got a splitter, and we used a splitter, and then we had one of my daughters had like just the Apple headphones. My other daughter, I have another headphone, and we did it, and the sound, and then I use Audacity, and the sound was just fine. I mean, it wasn't like picture perfect, but the audio was good enough to where I was like, we did it. Most people don't even notice that.
No, it sounded perfect. I constantly obsess. I very much bring a perfectionist attitude to everything, and that hurts me a lot rather than helps me. And I'm glad I live with my boyfriend, because he gives me the opposite view. He's like, why are you editing? Why do you care? Why are you spending 6 hours on this? And I'm like, well, I want it to sound good, but he's right. Like, you don't have to overanalyze or stress.
You don't have to. And that's a thing that I think is something women do, right? From when we're little, it has to be perfect. The dress has to look perfect.
Yes.
Everything has to look perfect before you go out. And that is something that I have had to unlearn. And part of it has come from watching my male friends and colleagues, because sometimes I'm like, okay, are you going to like share that? And they're like, yeah, why not? It's, at 65, 70%. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would, don't you need to make it a little bit? And I learned over time that you can make it better later. As long as it's at the point where you would be proud to share it, right? It's not perfect, but for podcasting and stuff, people hate bad audio.
Yes, you want to have good audio.
So you have to have good audio. There's some basics you have to meet for people to be able to say, okay, I'm going to listen to you. But it doesn't have to be like the when I recorded the trailer, I redid it because I realized I needed a pop filter. My P's were very strong. And I was like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to hear that all the time. So I was like, okay. So I went on Amazon. I did a little research and I got a pop filter. And then after that, I felt like my audio was good enough. And then I started like improving on things as I go along. And I'm trying to impart that on my daughters as well, because I can see them wanting things to be perfect. I'm like, why?
Yeah, it's almost like a female is born into the world with this anxiety. Like, as a woman, be perfect. As a woman, show up and be ready and know everything. And then men are like given this sense of entitlement where it's like, oh, you're a man. You must have opportunities we don't have. We're so happy and blessed to have you. It's like this weird, this internal approach we have to the world. Right.
And we perpetuate it in so many ways, because you always hear when you're, a girl, you're little, you hear people say to you, boys mature or girls mature faster, right?
Yes.
Boys mature a little bit later.
I was
So
just talking about that today.
so it's almost like the message is give them space to grow. They'll catch
Yes.
up. While for girls, there is none of that. No one says, you know, give her space to whatever. It's almost like you have to know how to do this and that and that. So you grow up thinking, oh my gosh, I really do have to be perfect when you don't.
Hmm.
And so that's been a good lesson for me, and one that I try to impart on people that I come across, my daughters and other women and other girls, when I notice that they're like not doing something because they think it's not good enough. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Is there some kind of example of like your daughters were procrastinating doing something and you were like, just do it?
my my little one during quarantine about 3 4 weeks ago, she decided she wanted to learn how to knit.
Hmm.
Now I don't know how to knit. I don't know how to knit at all. I have a
No.
sister who knows how to knit. And I thought, okay. And the reason she wanted to do that is because one of her besties knits, two
Uh-huh.
of her besties actually. And so I said, okay, fine. She said, can we go get some yarn? And I was like, do the research, tell me what I need, and we'll go. And so we went and we got yarn and we got, the knitting things
And you had her do the research.
I had her do the research. Oh yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And then she came
I feel
she
like
came home.
my mom would be like, okay, she kind of, I think she sometimes, I know she might be listening. Sorry, mom, but
Mm.
she over inserts herself into the
Yeah.
children's lives a little bit.
Yeah. No, I was like, no, you do the research, tell me what you need, and then we'll go get it. And I told her when we go to, because it's Michael's and they have all kinds of things in
Oh
there.
my God, Michael's has an aisle for
And
knitting.
and I get overwhelmed. And sometimes when you go with kids in there, they get distracted. They're like, oh my gosh, let's get this. I said, look, when we go in there, we're going to get yarn, and you're allowed to get distracted by one or two things. And so,
But
and after that, you
you can't
can't be
pick up
like,
two new hobbies. Yeah.
I can't be running around this store like a headless chicken. So so we got the yarn, and then she got on YouTube and she found this guy who knits, and he showed her how to knit, right? And so she started it, and it was a little frustrating, and I, I try to help her a little bit. I remember seeing my sister knitting, so I was able to be like, oh, I think you're supposed to do this. Anyway, this girl, she kept with it, right? A little frustrating. Then she started knitting, and it didn't look the way she wanted it to look. She wanted to look like her friend who has been knitting for a while. And
Yeah.
I said to her, look at what you're doing. You've never done this before. It's not perfect, right? But it looks pretty darn good for someone who just started, right?
Hmm.
And then she kept going and she kept going, but I could still see that there was this, oh my gosh, this is, for lack of a better word, like crappy. But I kept encouraging her.
This is not the best.
I kept saying it's not supposed to look perfect
Yeah.
because you're learning. So anyway, eventually 2 days
There's
ago,
no really nice way to say that, but you're
there's
like,
not really like, hey, and I always tell her, now you're 11, so mommy can be a little bit more, uh, uh, a little
like the real
more
world.
real with you, right? When you were
Yeah.
little, you would show me a painting and I'd say, oh my God, that's brilliant. She said, you used to do that? I said, yeah, because I have to encourage you to keep doing it. But now I can be a little more truthful, right?
Hmm.
And then 2 days ago, she was like, okay, I'm done. I'm finishing this off. And we had gone back to get some yarn because she wants to make me a scarf.
Hmm.
Michele, you should see the new scarf that she's making for me. The knitting is amazing.
Really?
Oh my gosh, it's neat. It is lined up. It is, and I said to her, look what you have done.
And this is
Because
only like her second project?
this is in 4 weeks that we've been doing this. Right? This is her second project. And I said to her, without that other one that looks a little, interesting,
Mm-hmm.
you would not have been able to create what you're creating now. If you had tried to achieve perfection with that, you would have probably given up,
Mm-hmm.
because it's frustrating.
And that's a
So
great
that,
lesson to impart on.
Mhm.
Like, do you think she heard you? Do you think she takes these lessons when you tell them to her?
I believe she does. I believe she does. My older one is harder for her because she's a perfectionist, but she's working on it. She works on it.
Yeah.
And, it's like you have to like keep encouraging and reminding, right? And eventually it sticks
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't have to be perfect. And then you yourself have to be okay with imperfection.
Yeah, you have to
So
learn to let go of some things.
right? Because sometimes I'll see something and I'm like, why isn't, and then I'm like, oh, it's actually okay as it is. It doesn't need to be perfected. So
Yeah. You can
have
give
to-
yourself a break. Be like, I don't have to criticize everything. I can just live in the
Exactly.
world.
Exactly, because sometimes you're the one who's actually perpetuating that
Right.
perfectionism. So
I
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
And my therapist is always like trying to tell me to relax in different ways. And I haven't really practiced that in reality, but I'm
Hmm.
always trying.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and that's all you can do, really,
Hmm.
is keep trying. Because to some degree, I'm the same way. I I have to constantly remind myself that it doesn't need to be perfect. It's fine as it is. And for a lot of times, the things that you're nitpicking, only you and maybe someone who knows you really well is going to notice.
Yeah,
You
I always
know,
think, especially like if I'm editing the podcast, I'm nitpicking it detail by detail to the point where I don't think anyone notices, and it's like
right?
it's just for me, and
Yeah,
that's like something I have to let go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
How do you learn how to be a parent? Like, how did you learn how to teach your daughters to be self-sufficient?
you know, that's a really great question. Um,
I want to know.
my mom is old school parenting, right? Like
Hmm.
my way or the highway, right? So it's
Like,
kind of
under
like
my roof, this is how it is.
my house, my rules, just do as I say. And, I turned out fine. But I remember,
I feel like that's what every person says. Like,
right.
it was
But
the best it could be. I'm fine.
I'm fine. But there are certain things that I remember, right? Like I recall that I used to say to myself when I was little, or not when I was little, like when I would start, I would say probably, 11, 12, a little bit older.
Mhm.
Like I used to say, when I grow up and I have children, these are the things that I'm going to do for myself, and these are the things that I'm going to make sure my kids have that I didn't have. And I'm not talking about material things. So a lot of my parenting, there's things that I take from my mom, and there's things that were really positive and great that I use as a parent, and then there's things that I take that my mom, even my dad did, that I took and said, we're not going to do this, right? These are not the
Right.
things. This is not how I'm going to raise my daughters. So, for instance, that feeling of powerlessness, right? That feeling of it's my way or the highway. I never forgot how it used to make me feel.
Probably
So
really makes you anti-authority.
anti-authority and powerless, right? Like, oh my gosh, I have no say. So
Hmm.
my daughters have a lot of say, a lot of leeway. Like they are allowed to negotiate. I teach them how to negotiate. I mean, sometimes I'll
That's
even say,
good.
like I remember one time we had gone to Jamba Juice, we had gone to Safeway, which is our local grocery store,
Hmm.
and my daughter at the time, she was maybe 7 or 8, and she wanted um, Jamba Juice, and I said no, and she said okay, and I was like, "Is that it?" And she looked at me like super confused, like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Do, do you think you deserve a Jamba Juice?" She said, "Well, I want one," and I said, "Why? Convince me. Why should
Right.
you get a Jamba Juice?"
That's
and
good.
and it's partly because also as women we're so uncomfortable negotiating. It's so much
Hmm.
easier to say, okay, yeah, I'll just go for it. And when I was little and I could negotiate, well, I couldn't even negotiate because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even.
Yeah, it
If my
wasn't
mom
really
says no,
it was
is
really on the
no.
table.
Yeah, and so I've given them a lot of rope, but every so often I have to reel it in, right?
Like you're
It's like a
coaching.
slippery slope, right? You have to be like, okay, you can negotiate and you can, sometimes disagree with me, but you have to be respectful, right?
Mhm.
And there's only so far you can go. And then I give my teenager, she has a lot of freedom, and she drives now and she can go do things. And all I say to my daughters is that I afford you a lot of trust. Do not betray my trust, because I think all
Which
of
is
your
that's already like scary enough
it's
where I'm like,
scary enough.
okay, I won't betray your trust.
Because all of these privileges that you have, you have to know your children's currency. All of the things that you know they love, they can go away. It's not a threat, although my
Mhm.
little one sometimes will say, you're threatening me. um I say it's not a threat. It's just that if I trust you, then that means I know that you have the capability, and um that you know what's right and wrong, and that you're gonna, at the end of the day, I've given you the foundation, or we've given you the foundation to know how to make the right choices. So don't set up a secret Instagram account,
Yeah, because
because
then you'll betray your trust.
you'll betray my trust. If I find out that you have a secret Instagram account, I'll be like, okay, what are you doing? Or uh, just don't do things that make me feel or think that you're doing stuff that I don't want to know. You're a teenager. You're going to do stuff that I don't want to know.
Yeah. It's inevitable.
It's inevitable. But when I give you a lot of rope, really, compared to how I grew up. So a lot of times I've read up a little bit. I read up a little bit about it
Mhm.
because I've never been a mom, say, for example, to a teenager. So I picked up a book.
Yeah, because that's a whole
I
nother animal, the
It's
teenage
another whole
mind.
other animal. And a lot of times you meet people and they say to you, "Oh my god!" When you say you have a teenager, it's like their shoulders drop and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh my!" It's like the worst. And I always
It's like
say,
I'm still
"Well,
carrying that pain of my teenager.
oh my gosh!" And I didn't want that to be the case.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, I was a teenager once. I don't know. I was powerless most of the time. I was going through all these changes, but my mom really was like, whatever, just
Yeah.
do as I say. And I didn't want to look at my daughter as this bad person, that she was going to be a bad person. So I was like, let me read up about it a little bit, and I found this book. It's called the what is it called? Untamed, Untapped. Oh, now I forget.
There's a
The
book
seven,
called Untamed.
Untamed, I think, or is it I I can't think of it right now. This guiding your teenage daughter through the 7 stages of adulthood,
Hmm.
and oh my gosh, it was a lifesaver for me. And I have to tell you a story. My daughter saw me reading it, and she was like, "Oh, mommy, that's cool. You want to know how to figure me out. I like that." I was like, okay. But she appreciated that I was trying.
Yeah.
And
And the fact that you even got the book shows like the interest you're taking, the
mm-hmm,
proactiveness.
mm-hmm,
Because that subtitle, guiding your teenager to be an adult, like no one ever tells you to do that, really.
right. No one, no one. And I didn't want to make, I mean, you're going to make mistakes, but I wanted to make, you know, informed mistakes, because you're human. So you're going to, even though you read up about something, sometimes your reaction is going to go against, what you know.
Hmm.
Um, but it has been super super helpful, because one, their generation is so different from ours, right?
Every
They're so
generation, yeah.
different. They have like so much information. You move back a little bit, the lighting is weird. and
It's okay.
and so it's been very helpful. And then I also found another book which was about sexuality, right?
Hmm.
Because that's also another, like, topic that's difficult for mothers or for parents to talk about with their
Something
kids.
you have to educate your children about.
Yeah, and then the other thing, and also it's such a different time. The way like their younger generations think about sexuality is not the same way that my generation, your generation, older generations thought about it. And I didn't want to be this like dinosaur.
Yeah. You want to be
So,
teaching them in their language.
exactly. And so I found this amazing book, and it has been so good and so informative and so timely, because sometimes, teenagers will ask you questions and I'm like, oh my God, how do I answer that? And I had read, it so happened that I had read up about it.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I know how to answer this.
You were prepared.
I was prepared.
Which is great, because otherwise a lot of parents either lie or they tell like half truths, and you're like, as a kid, they're not telling you the truth.
You do. And I want my daughters to go out there empowered about their sexuality. I don't want them to go out there and, not know enough to own it.
Yeah, you want to educate them. You want to arm them with knowledge.
Educated and to arm them with knowledge and to know what they want, and what they don't want. And,
right.
To be able to stand up for themselves. Because a lot of times, one of the biggest issues that women and girls face is abuse, right? And
kind of like manipulation and
being psychological manipulation.
Yeah, power moves.
And I if you don't know, if no one has really taught you or explained to you that this is what you're going to face in the world, how are you going to be able to handle it? So it's almost like we're perpetuating a never-ending cycle of girls that really don't know. They don't know their power. They don't know how to use it. They don't know how to they don't know the cues, to read certain cues. And
yeah, you don't want something like they call it grooming, where like a young girl is taken advantage of by an older man, because the girl doesn't know. She's like a teenager, yeah.
Right. Or even in the relationships with their peers, right? Like guys who are their age, like asking them to do certain things, right? And if you don't teach them that, hey, relationships are reciprocal, and you have to feel valued. You should never feel like you have to do something unless you want to do it. You have to be able to talk about it. You're not arming them with the tools that they need to survive. Really.
Right. Do you remember what that book is called?
It is called, oh my gosh, let me get it.
Okay. I feel like I've heard about it before. Yeah, go ahead.
It's called, let me get it real quick.
When Jedidah comes back, I'm going to ask her if she wants to vent about anything.
It is called Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein.
Yes. Okay. Peggy Orenstein, I've heard of.
Yeah. And
that's a pretty recent, it's recently written, I think.
Yes. It was actually published. Well, when it was published, it's not that old.
I don't think it was around when I was a kid.
No, it definitely wasn't. It was published in 2016. So,
okay.
5 years ago, 6 years ago.
And you think it's been super helpful, it sounds like.
To me, yes. And I think it would be helpful to a lot of parents and to a lot of people who are not like Gen Z.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's probably applicable to all children, like girls or boys, whatever.
Girls or boys, and some of the things in here were shocking to me. I was like, "That's how things are done now."
Yeah, because the generational gap. You're like, "Whoa, I missed something."
Yes, I must have missed something. So it was like enlightening. It was enlightening because, like I said, when we were driving and we were on the freeway, and my daughter turned to me and says, "Can I ask you something?" And she asked me a question, and I almost fainted, but I didn't show it because I had I had read about it, and I was like, I know how to answer this question without dodging.
Yeah, and without feeling unconfident that you couldn't answer it.
That I couldn't answer it. And you think about it, sex is one of the most natural things, right? But yet there's so much,
it's stigmatized,
stigma and taboo around it, and
in our culture. In other cultures not so much, but in American culture, so stigmatized.
And so I want girls to be comfortable talking about it. There is nothing uncomfortable about it. It's natural. It's like eating. You need it. So as a woman, you should have.
It's why they're alive.
Right. And you should have a voice about it, and you should feel powerful and all of the other things. And so, so those two books have been really helpful to me lately, right? Now that I have that I have teens,
I want to read that book when I'm a parent for sure.
Yes, that one, and the
Untapped or Untamed.
Untamed, one of the two. I don't know why I can't remember. But one thing I was going to say too is that I'm sure there are books out there for boys as well.
Yeah, and that's probably, you do want to talk to girls and boys a little differently, but you still want them both to have the same foundation of understanding.
And I think it's so important for boys to learn the same things, right? To learn about sexuality and to be informed, so that when they go into relationships, there's no misogyny, right? Or
right.
So there's no sexism, because a lot of these things are taught, right? When you hear things like, "Oh, boys will be boys," I'm like, no. No,
it's like that, but we're all equal, right?
Right. It's like, if you would not find that acceptable with anybody else, it shouldn't be acceptable because that person is a boy, right?
Agreed.
So, I think I think it's important for both boys and girls to be informed about stuff.
For sure. I want to wrap up because I know you have to go soon.
Yeah.
So I have two different segment ideas. Do you want to spin the roulette wheel and get a random question? Or do you want to vent about the topic of your choice for a little bit, if there's anything you want to vent about?
Vent? No. I like the idea of the roulette. Let's do the roulette. I think that's fun.
Okay, I'll tell you where it lands.
Oh my gosh. What did I get myself into?
So if you could have any superpower, what would you choose and why?
To give myself more time.
That sounds like the perfect superpower.
If I could just have more time, I would be the happiest girl in the world, because I'm always, there's so much to do, not in terms of complaining, right? There's a lot of chores to do, and they have to get done and all that stuff. And they take up time, but time to do the things that I love to do, but still be a good mom, right? Still be a good colleague, and still be a good daughter and partner and all of those things. I just feel like I just run out of time all the time. I'm like,
because how do you give your all to everything?
To everything. And I'm always like, I didn't get to do this and this and this. And I'm learning every day to just let go and to be like, okay, to appreciate the things that I was able to do, and to keep improving in terms of, time management and not scheduling too much, not packing too much to do in a day, because then I set myself up sometimes for disappointment, because then I'm like, oh my God, I will only be able to do two things.
Yeah. I have this problem too. I preach it to the choir, where I'm always like, why is my to-do list never getting shorter?
Right.
It makes you feel bad.
Makes you feel bad. Yeah.
But if you practice gratitude and if you set realistic to-do lists, like, make sure you can do these things today, you're really preparing yourself for success.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not so disappointed at the end of the day.
Yes. Well, Jedidah, I want to let you go. Tell us where to find you, anything you want to promote, and tell us where to find your podcast.
Yes. So my podcast is Her Canvas, as in her and canvas, like canvas. And it's available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Finally got on Pandora.
Congrats.
Amazon Music and iHeartRadio. I think the main ones are, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. So on
Spotify too.
Spotify too. Yes, Spotify for sure. So you can find me there. You can also, I also have a blog. It's called Gap News, and you can find me on gapnews.com. I publish a lot of stuff to educate, inspire, and empower women, especially when it comes to, financial health and talking about women's issues and stories, and then also lifestyle tips, right? Because we gotta have some fun while we're learning about all of these things that we got to deal with. And that's the same thing for my podcast. It's really an extension of my blog. I started with my blog, and then I decided, you know what, I'm going to do a podcast to amplify women's voices even more. And then finally, I have a Facebook community, a Facebook group called Gap News Women. And that's a place where, women and, girls can get together to connect, to collaborate, to engage, and to thrive together in the spirit of sisterhood. So those are the three places.
Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and Gap News is also on Facebook and Twitter, and the handle on Twitter is @GapNews.
Perfect, and I'll link it all down below. Thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time talking to you.
I had a great time talking to you too. This was fun. I didn't even realize how quickly the time went by.
I know, we started the conversation and Jedidah's like, I don't think I could talk for very long. I'm not that interesting. And then look what happens.
I know, it's amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 4:30 already.
See, you can always surprise yourself.
Yes. But thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Of course. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.